Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today's May 15th, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, first and foremost, I want to go over Bakhmut. This is where all the action is currently happening, and what's great is that now there is more positive news coming out of the city. The last few months, it seems like I've always been giving bad news, and the Russians were successful at pushing further and further and grabbing more territory around Bakhmut and within the city. But now the Ukrainians managed to pick up an initiative and launched two local counteroffensives in the north and the south. And there's a lot of successful, it's quite a successful operation so far. The Ukrainians have managed to regain a lot of territory back, and we're concentrating mostly in the south right now because that's where the Ukrainians are really putting a lot of pressure on the Russians, and so much pressure that they have cut off their communication in the south, and the first line of defense around there, and their supply lines, and also this led to the elimination of some key Russian commanders this weekend, which were confirmed by the Russians themselves. And so the Ukrainians continue to push, and the main goal right now is to go all the way up to Klishivka, regain the high ground here, which they have lost 2-3 months ago from the Russians, and really get back to Klishivka. And having this high ground in the south is really important. However, on the other side is that the Russians are redoubling down, the Wagner forces are doubling down, they continue on pushing, and they try to get the remainder of the city of Bakhmut. So the Ukrainians, as you can see here on this satellite image, control about 5% of Bakhmut at this point. So they really are pushed on the side, on the western edge of the city. So the Russians are doing everything possible to kick out the Ukrainians out of there, but it's really difficult. And every day it seems like, they're struggling more and more. So hopefully the strategy will work out. The Ukrainians will be able to really have a lot of success here and push out the Russians, encircle them, encircle Bakhmut, and force the Wagner forces to leave Bakhmut and flee. I think that's the strategy here. Contain the Russians within Bakhmut and give them a way out to escape the city of Bakhmut. So we'll see how successful that's going to be. And in the south as well, the Ukrainian forces have not shied away from posting a lot of videos of their successes and their successful operations. And one thing that really struck me is how poorly prepared the Russian forces in the outskirts of Bakhmut are. They don't have anything to really counter the combined arms operations that the Ukrainians are currently conducting. And what I mean by that is that the Ukrainians have really seem to master more and more this combined arms operations. They had a drone overlooking the Russian positions, giving real-time intel to the Ukrainian forces that were advancing. And I saw, a main battle tank with an IFV that was transporting, about a dozen soldiers. And once the IFV dropped off the Ukrainian soldiers, you had the main battle tank moving around, giving fire support with the IFV as well, giving fire support, which allowed the Ukrainian soldiers to drop off and safely start clearing the trenches. And usually, because the outskirts of Bakhmut, there's a lot of farmland, as you can see. Usually, for both sides, they position their defenses and their trenches on very thin sort of forests, right? They're kind of like the edge of the farms, as you can see here. Like, let's say one farm like this, and this is kind of the dividing territory between the two farms, and you have a little thin forest, and that's where usually the Russians would position their trenches in. So it's very thin, but it gives good coverage and a lot of foliage, and more difficult for the Ukrainians to hit them there because you have obviously tree cover. And so to me, that was really surprising how easy it was for the main battle tank, the Ukrainian main battle tank, to just storm through and start just destroying the Russian positions. And the Russians in these videos had zero ability to defend themselves. I think the best thing they had was a grenade, and that's it. They didn't have any RPGs, ATGMs, mines, which is great news for the Ukrainians, but it indicates to you that the Russians, especially the Wagner forces, are only good at one thing, and that's just doing their meat wave offensives. When it comes down to defending, they're not good. And the main reason is because they don't have any communication between one another, and they're just being forced to go one direction. And they're never meant to go and withdraw and, go on the defense. So as long as Prigozhin had a manpower advantage, he was able to, push and push and push in Bakhmut. But now you're seeing he's complaining, and he's been complaining a lot because he sees that he's running out of not only manpower but ammunition, so he cannot defend the outskirts of Bakhmut. They can still do that within the city because they're concentrating the majority of its forces here, but on the outskirts of Bakhmut, that's just not happening. And just a quick overview of the map, just so you guys can get an idea. We're seeing a lot of blue now, which is great news. So the Ukrainians have liberated pretty much, a couple kilometers, a couple kilometers south of the TO504 highway. So if we're measuring the distance from here to about here, it's about 2 kilometers. So nothing crazy, but it's not really easy as well because the Russians have had a lot of time to put defenses here. But that gives me confidence by seeing the videos how poorly prepared the Russians are at defending, that the Ukrainians can easily break through their lines. In the next couple of weeks, we should be seeing the Ukrainians within Klishivka, Andriivka, and start pushing out the Russian forces from Opitne, Odradivka, and all the other settlements south of Bakhmut. And the same goes for the north. Right now, the Ukrainians are really trying to push around Berhivka, Yahidne, which was lost about 2 months ago from the Russians. And so again, the same goes here. Is the goal is to go to Solidar, right? Grab Solidar in Krasna Hora. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm very confident that the Ukrainians will be able to recapture what was lost a few months ago without any problems. Now, let's go to the other slide. And today was also really great news. I guess the past week has been really great in terms of European support. Ukraine got a lot of support from Germany, France, and now Britain. So Zelensky met the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak today, and he pledged to give more air defense missiles and also armed drones to Ukraine on top of the Storm Shadows that have already been received last week. So on top of that, we also have Germany that, after talks with Berlin, when Zelensky met with Olaf Scholz, basically they confirmed that they're going to give even more, a bigger defense aid package to Ukraine, including Leopard tanks, and I believe it's the 1A5, so it's the first generation Leopard, and also anti-aircraft systems, most likely the Gepards, and maybe the Iris-T. So this is one of the largest since the beginning of the full-scale war. So great that Germany as well is pitching in, and also after his visit to France with Emmanuel Macron, he's pledged as well to give Ukraine some of the light tanks, the AMX RC-10s, if I'm not mistaken, the wheeled tank, and also some armored vehicles as well. So overall, this is what Ukraine needs. It needs more weapons, it needs more vehicles, more tanks, more missiles to be able to launch this counteroffensive. And it has started, but right now it's local offensives to confuse the Russians. And I think it's working well so far. Now, I want to share you an interesting video, and this is the interview of a Russian soldier that there was a video that came out last week of a Russian soldier that surrendered by communicating with a Ukrainian drone. He saw the drone and he started waving at it, kind of saying that I give up, I surrender, and the Ukrainians dropped off a leaflet or some sort of communication to let him know how he can surrender safely. And so he surrendered via communicating with the drone, and this is now an interview with this Russian soldier, and kind of an interesting insight as to how he got there in the first place and what was the kind of relationship with his commanders, right? Which obviously wasn't great, but interesting to know what happened before that. So I'm going to do the voiceover in English. Thank you to Anton Herashenko, who made this translation. He has a Twitter account, so he translates a lot of these, interviews with Russian soldiers, and also, the insanity that's going on within the Russian propaganda channels as well. So anyways, so let me do a voiceover here. So an adult officer of the Russian army told you that now you will go with him. Yes, PMC Wagner provided us with one guide, and he said, "So no one lags behind. Follow me here. Whoever backs up, I'll kill him. Whoever backs up, I'll nullify." Keep in mind that there may be gunfire on the road. If someone gets caught, I won't pull anyone out. I'll just finish him off. And that's how he began to escort us to our position. So he voiced this in front of Lieutenant Gruznitsev. No, after that. Didn't you, three military soldiers, have questions about whether he was nuts? He cannot be your commander. He's a member of an illegal armed formation. You three have submachine guns, and he's the one that's telling you that if you try to back up, if you're wounded, he'll kill you. For me personally, I take that as fascism. I understand you, but you need to understand us too. We're only in that place for 2 days. We're brought there, we don't know where to go. Besides, the platoon commander gave the order. So I find it very interesting. And, to be very fair with you guys, I have very little sympathy for the Russian soldier at this point. I might have had some sympathy in the beginning of this conflict. Maybe some of them, they know where they were going, they were lied to, but at this point, all of them know where they're going. They know they're going to Ukraine and they're going there to kill Ukrainians just because they're Ukrainian. So my sympathy level is very minuscule at this point, but I'm still happy that some Russian soldiers surrender and they're given the chance to live. I think preserving human life is very important, and we should not become some bloodthirsty people and wish death to everyone that's from Russia. I'm happy that he survived. I'm happy that he surrendered, and hopefully this moment gave him some clarity as to what type of country he's fighting for. I can only wish, right? There's obviously been a lot of situations where Russian soldiers said one thing, and then they said another when they were returned back to Russia, and then they start saying that the Ukrainians were, Nazis, and they beat me up, and they did this and that, and I wasn't even fed. Right, obviously, I get it. It's also because there's media pressure and you don't want to say the wrong thing. But it seems like most of them, when they return to Russia, they just spew the same propaganda that was given to them when they were in Russia before. So I'm overall just happy that there's still Russian soldiers that have some critical thinking, but we need more of them if they ever decide to turn against, their governments and, the fascist government that exists in Russia. Anyway, so that I find to be very interesting. And the last thing is I want to finish today with a positive post of the day. And for many of you, you might recognize this picture. This was Vokzalna Street in Bucha. So the Russians, in the very early phase of the war, the first week of the invasion, they went through Bucha with a massive convoy, and they were ambushed by the Ukrainian forces. And this was one of their biggest loss, in my opinion. They've lost dozens of vehicles in that one ambush. It was truly brutal and catastrophic loss for the Russians, but also brought a lot of damage to the city center, the main street of Bucha. And you can see how it looked like back in March of 2022 and how it looks like today. You wouldn't even think that there was, a conflict that happened here, by just looking at the picture. But I truly find that it's amazing. It warms my heart to see that the Ukrainian people have this type of spirit of rebuilding, and that's why the Ukrainians are unbreakable and they're not going to lose this war, right? This is the type of attitude you need to have to win the war, right? And to me, I'm super happy to see these types of images. And a lot of people also said, that walked around Kiev are very surprised at how quickly things are being rebuilt, right? All the damaged buildings from the missile strikes and things like that. The Ukrainians want to forget very quickly about this war. I shouldn't say forget, but they want to restore Ukraine to a better Ukraine, right? It's not about forgetting, because what the Russians have done, it's something that you cannot never forget, right? And I think even to a certain extent, never forgive the Russians. But at least bring some normalcy back to Ukraine is obviously going to be important. And that's why I believe Ukraine is unbreakable. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe to my channel. I'm, again, super grateful for anyone that enjoys my channel, enjoys watching my videos. And the most important thing is that my audience cares about Ukraine, cares about the cause, and is doing what they can to support Ukraine. So again, a huge thank you, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.